The red and blue lights flashed behind him, cutting through the evening darkness like a warning. Marcus Reed's stomach sank. He hadn't been speeding, hadn't broken a single traffic rule, and yet here he was, being pulled over on his way home from work. His hands tightened on the steering wheel, his heart thumping slow and steady as the police siren wailed. He glanced in the rearview mirror. The cruiser behind him had 2 officers inside, both young, both white. He already knew what this was. The same story he'd heard too many times from clients, friends, even strangers who shared his skin color. But now, the state attorney of the district was living it himself. Marcus pulled over carefully, putting the car in park. He rolled down the window and rested both hands on the wheel where they could see them. The late evening air was humid, thick with the smell of asphalt after a light rain. The officers stepped out of their vehicle. Their flashlights flicked on immediately, beams of white light slicing through the dim street. One approached on the driver's side while the other lingered near the rear bumper. Their hands hovered close to their weapons. "License and registration," said the taller one curtly, his tone clipped and sharp. "Good evening, officer," Marcus replied in a calm, steady voice. "May I ask what the stop is for?" The officer, Miller, according to his name tag, didn't answer the question. "License and registration," he repeated, the words colder this time. Marcus sighed quietly and moved slowly, his every action deliberate. "I'm reaching into my jacket pocket," he said, narrating his movements. "Just so there's no misunderstanding." He handed over the documents. The second officer, Hayes, took them without a word and walked back toward the cruiser. Miller's flashlight beam swept across the car's interior, pausing briefly on the leather seats and the briefcase on the passenger side. "You live around here?" Miller asked after a moment, suspicion lacing his tone. "Yes," Marcus said, keeping his voice even. "I work downtown." "Oh yeah, what do you do?" Marcus met his gaze through the mirror. "I'm the state attorney." For a second, Miller froze. The tension flickered across his face before he tried to mask it with a faint laugh. "State attorney, huh, that's a new one." Marcus didn't smile. "You can check the ID in your partner's hand." The silence stretched uncomfortably. When Hayes returned, his face had changed completely, his earlier confidence replaced by unease. He leaned toward Miller and whispered something. Marcus caught fragments. "State attorney, database confirmed." The officers exchanged nervous glances. Miller straightened his back. Mr. Reed," he began awkwardly, "looks like there's been a mistake. The system flagged your plate as matching a stolen vehicle, but it seems it was an input error. You're free to go." Marcus didn't move. His hands still rested on the steering wheel, calm but firm. "A system error," he repeated softly. "You drew your weapons, demanded my license, and searched my car with your eyes for something to justify the stop, all because of an error." Miller's throat bobbed. We were just following protocol, sir." "No," Marcus said, turning his head slightly. "You were following bias. Let's call it what it is." The street was quiet now, save for the hum of the cruiser's engine. A couple of cars slowed to watch the scene unfold, drivers curious about the tension. "You see, officers," Marcus continued, voice steady and deliberate, "this is exactly why my office is flooded with cases about racial profiling and excessive force. Because every mistake like this, every time you stop a man for looking suspicious when he's just driving home, you remind us that justice isn't applied equally." Neither of them spoke. Marcus reached for his wallet again, pulled out a business card, and handed it through the window. "Next time you think of stopping someone for no reason, remember that name. Because I'll be the one reviewing the complaints that land on your desk." He started his car, rolled up his window, and pulled away slowly, leaving the 2 officers standing silent in the flashing glow of their cruiser lights. The drive home felt heavier than usual. His chest was tight, the anger simmering beneath the surface of his calm. No matter how many titles he earned, no matter how many cases he won, he could still be reduced in an instant to just another black man behind the wheel. When he reached his house, the porch light was on. His daughter, Lila, ran out barefoot, a huge grin on her face. "Daddy, you're home," she shouted, wrapping her arms around his leg. He bent down, scooping her up into his arms, forcing a smile. "I sure am, sweetheart. Grandma said you were working late again," she said, pouting slightly. "I was," he said quietly. "But I'm here now." Inside, his mother looked up from the kitchen table. The moment she saw his face, her expression softened. "You had one of those nights, didn't you?" she asked gently. Marcus nodded, setting Lila down. Pulled over again. 2 young officers. Said it was a mistake. His mother's lips tightened. "Mistake," she echoed bitterly. "That's what they always say." He sank into the chair across from her. "They recognized me halfway through. You should have seen their faces. But what if I wasn't who I am? What if I was just another guy trying to get home?" She reached across the table and took his hand. "Then maybe you wouldn't be sitting here now," she said softly. Her words lingered long after he went to bed that night. The next morning, Marcus walked into the courthouse, dressed in his usual dark suit and determined calm. But today, his focus wasn't just on his caseload, it was on something bigger. The system he worked so hard to defend had just shown him, once again, how broken it truly was. That afternoon, he sat in a meeting with the police commissioner, the mayor, and several department heads. The topic on the agenda was police reform, a meeting Marcus had been advocating for months before last night's incident. When his turn came to speak, he didn't hold back. "Last night," he began, "I was stopped by 2 officers for no reason. They didn't tell me why. They approached my car with their hands on their guns. The only thing they saw was a black man driving a nice car in the wrong part of town." The room fell silent. The mayor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The commissioner cleared his throat. "Marcus, I'm sure they didn't mean." Marcus raised a hand. "Intent doesn't erase impact. You can't keep excusing these encounters as misunderstandings. Because one day, one of these mistakes will cost someone their life." The weight of his words settled over the room. He leaned forward, his tone measured but fierce. "I'm not here for apologies. I'm here for accountability. Mandatory bias training. Public data transparency. Real consequences for racial profiling. Because if the state attorney isn't safe from unjust policing, who is?" By the time he left the room, the message was clear: change would begin, and it would begin now. That evening, as he sat on the couch with Lila watching cartoons, his phone buzzed. A journalist friend had sent him a link. Bodycam footage of his traffic stop had leaked. It was already spreading across social media, #Justice for Marcus Reed trending nationwide. He stared at the video, watching the moment the officers realized who he was. Watching their fear shift from suspicion to panic. Watching the whole world finally see what he'd lived through. Lila looked up from her coloring book. "Daddy, why are people talking about you on TV?" Marcus smiled faintly and kissed her forehead. "Because sometimes, sweetheart, telling the truth makes people listen. And now they finally are." That night, for the first time in a long while, Marcus felt something close to hope. Change was coming. Because this time, the world couldn't look away. The morning after the video leaked, the city felt different. The air outside Marcus Reed's house buzzed with tension and curiosity. News vans lined the street, reporters waiting to catch a glimpse of the man whose traffic stop had become a national story overnight. Marcus stood by the window, sipping his coffee, his mind still processing everything that had happened. He hadn't intended for the footage to go public, but now that it had, there was no turning back. The incident that once left him humiliated was now a spark for something much larger. He adjusted his tie as his phone rang for what felt like the 100th time that morning. It was his assistant, Carla. "Marcus, the governor's office called again," she said quickly. "They want a statement before noon. The media's everywhere. CNN, NBC, even BBC is running the story. They're calling it the state attorney stop." Marcus sighed. "Tell them I'll release a statement at the press conference this afternoon. Until then, no comment." "Got it," she replied. And Marcus, Be careful. Some people aren't happy about this." He hung up and looked toward the living room. His mother sat on the couch, the news playing on low volume. Lila was still asleep upstairs. "They're saying you embarrassed the entire department," his mother said softly. "The police union's furious." Marcus set his mug down. "If they're angry, that means they're listening." The press conference was held at City Hall. The steps were packed with reporters, flashing cameras, and protesters holding signs that read "Justice has no color and end racial profiling now." Marcus walked through the crowd, his expression composed but his heart pounding. He wasn't just an attorney today, he was a symbol. When he stepped up to the microphone, the noise faded. Cameras zoomed in, microphones angled forward. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice calm and resonant. "Many of you have seen the video of my traffic stop. Yes, it was real. Yes, it happened exactly as it appeared. And yes, it could have ended very differently." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. "I wasn't stopped because of a broken law. I was stopped because of broken trust," he continued. "And while I may wear this suit and hold this office, there are thousands of others who don't have the same protection I do. They don't have a title that suddenly makes officers back down. They just have their skin, and that's enough to put them at risk." Reporters scribbled furiously, recording every word. "I'm not here to condemn the police. I'm here to demand accountability. Justice doesn't work if fear runs deeper than fairness." He paused, letting the words sink in before concluding. "We will investigate this incident thoroughly. And I promise, the reforms that come after won't just be words on paper. They'll be change written in law." The crowd erupted in applause. Some shouted his name, others chanted, "Justice! Justice!" as he stepped down from the podium. That night, his phone buzzed non-stop, calls from other state officials, messages of support, and even threats. But the one that mattered most came from the police commissioner himself. "Marcus, we need to talk privately," the commissioner said. "The two officers, Miller and Hayes, have been suspended pending investigation. Internal affairs is involved." Marcus exhaled slowly. "That's a start. Look," the commissioner said, "the department's under pressure. The union's blaming me, the public's blaming them, and the mayor wants peace before this gets out of hand. What do you want me to do?" "I want you to admit what's obvious," Marcus replied. "That this wasn't just a mistake. It was bias. Call it by its name, and we can start rebuilding trust." There was silence on the other end. Then the commissioner said quietly, "You're asking for something that will shake the foundation of this city." "Maybe it needs to be shaken," Marcus said before hanging up. In the following days, the story exploded across the nation. Interviews, op-eds, and debates filled every major network. Marcus was invited to speak at universities, on talk shows, and in front of state panels. People saw in him a man who refused to stay silent, even when he had something to lose. Meanwhile, Miller and Hayes faced a formal investigation. At first, they claimed the stop was a procedural mistake. But the body cam footage told a different story, one of hesitation, prejudice, and fear that had no justification. When the Internal Review Board met, Marcus was invited to attend as an observer. He sat silently at the long wooden table as the footage played again on the screen. The office's nervous voices, the way Miller's hand lingered near his holster, the tone of superiority that vanished the second they realized who Marcus was. When the lights came back on, the boardroom was quiet. Miller finally spoke, his voice low. "Sir, I didn't mean any harm. I swear, we see things differently sometimes. You get cautious." "Cautious?" Marcus asked, his tone calm but cutting. "You mean scared? Of me? Why?" The young officer didn't answer. Marcus leaned forward. "You didn't see a man driving home from work. You saw a threat, and until that changes, no badge or apology will fix this." After the hearing, Marcus walked out of the building to a crowd of reporters. One asked, "Mr. Reed, do you forgive the officers?" He stopped for a moment. "Forgiveness isn't the issue," he said. "Understanding is, and that has to come before forgiveness ever can." Over the next few weeks, The city council met to vote on a sweeping reform package Marcus helped draft. Mandatory racial bias and de-escalation training, body cam transparency, and an independent civilian review board for all traffic stops. It passed with a narrow majority. The night the law was signed, Marcus returned home late. The porch light glowed softly, and through the window he saw his mother asleep on the couch, the TV still on. Lila was upstairs, her nightlight casting faint stars across the ceiling. He walked into the quiet house and sat at the kitchen table, exhaustion washing over him. His phone buzzed again. This time, a text from an unknown number. It was Officer Hayes. "Mr. Reed, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't realize how blind we were until I watched that footage. I hope you know I'm trying to change." Marcus stared at the message for a long time before typing back a simple reply, "Then prove it. Change starts with you." He set the phone down and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in weeks, the tension in his chest began to ease. Days later, during a televised interview, a journalist asked him, "Do you think things will really change, Mr. Reed, or is this just another moment the world will forget?" Marcus smiled faintly, his gaze steady. Change doesn't happen because the world remembers, it happens because people refuse to forget. Months passed. The protests quieted, but the progress continued. Police community meetings became a regular occurrence. Officers and citizens began working together to rebuild what had been broken. Miller and Hayes were reassigned, after completing mandatory retraining programs. And every time Marcus drove past that same intersection where it had all begun, he slowed down, not in fear, but in reflection. That moment of injustice had turned into a movement. One evening, Lila climbed into his lap, holding a crayon drawing of their family. "Daddy," she said softly, "you look happy again." He smiled, pulling her close. "That's because we made something good come out of something bad, sweetheart." She tilted her head. "You mean like turning rain into rainbows?" Marcus laughed quietly. "Exactly like that," and as the sun dipped below the skyline, painting the city in warm light, he realized that maybe, just maybe, this was how change began. Not with anger or fear, but with courage, truth, and the hope that tomorrow would be better than today.